This series discusses sexual assault and contains language that some may find offensive. Listener discretion is advised. After I had been working on this podcast for months, there was one person who I really needed to get in touch with, but was unsuccessful in reaching. It was Fredrico Lowe-Bey's alibi witness, his then-girlfriend Siobhan Johnson. She testified during the trial that she and Fredrico were at home, asleep, when the rape happened at Spring and Folsom around 5 a.m. on May 21, 1988. She testified that they stayed up late that night and went to bed around 2:30 in the morning, and that they didn't get up until 9:30 the next day. She was the best witness the defense had to counter the state's claim that Fredrico raped and sodomized a woman in a South City alley at 5 a.m. I initially reached out to Johnson on Facebook. My messages to her earlier this year went unanswered. A voicemail went unanswered as well, and I couldn't find a current address. I was starting to get worried that she didn't want to talk to me. What if her story had changed? Did she still stand by Fredrico's innocence? Or does she now believe that he could have done it? Has she found out more information that she didn't know during the trial? It would be a massive hole in the story to not have Johnson on the record. Finally, I did get the right phone number for Siobhan Johnson. And when I called, I introduced myself and said I wanted to talk to her about Fredrico Lowe-Bey. She said something quickly while the phone cut in and out, and then the call dropped. Not a good sign, I thought. I called right back, hoping that it was just a bad connection. I again explained that I wanted to speak with her about Fredrico. She didn't talk about Fredrico in the phone call, but told me, I just want to get this interview done. I had no idea what she meant by that, but I didn't ask in the phone call. I figured it would be better to save my questions for the actual interview. A few days later, I drove down a road lined with old brick homes in a South St. Louis neighborhood. It was gloomy out that morning. The ground was still wet from a recent rain. I got out of my car, and there was a woman sitting on her porch across the street waiting for me.
How you doing this morning?
Hello, Miss Siobhan.
Come on in.
As I was setting up the microphones at her dining room table, she cut to the chase.
And this I know he didn't do.
You still believe that he didn't do it?
I know he didn't do it. We were together when they talking about it went down. We were together, and it's no lie. Nothing my story is not going to ever change us. It's the truth.
Johnson was sticking to her story from 1988. She said she was initially hesitant to speak with me because she thought it wouldn't do any good. Fredrico's been in prison for nearly 4 decades. After he went away, life on the outside kept going. But after thinking for a while about doing the interview, she said she had a change of heart.
I mean, I wasn't going to talk to you, but God put it on my heart. Why not? Help him. Help him. You know he's innocent. Help him. That's why I agreed to do it with you. Because I wash my hands. I mean, I don't never see him again anyway. Then I said, no. I prayed to God and, okay, I'm going to meet with him.
Our interview surfaced old wounds that have never fully healed.
Fell in love with my child. Took her as his own. How many people do that? Not many, Not many. Haven't y'all had enough of his life? Haven't y'all had enough of it? You took 37 years from this man. Isn't that enough for something he didn't do?
Johnson said she's never gone to visit Fredrico in prison. It would be too much to bear seeing him behind bars. After the years of denials and pushback from the state on Fredrico's attempts at exoneration, there was one last possibility for him to prove his innocence to a court, and his fate is hanging in the balance. From First Alert 4, I'm Matt Woods, and this is Burden of Proof, one man's fight to show he's innocent. This is a true story about how difficult it is to prove actual innocence after a jury has declared you guilty. Former St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner vowed to review Fredrico's conviction while she was in office. She was first elected circuit attorney in 2016. Before she won the election, one of her supporters, Jamala Rogers, told her about the Fredrico Lowe-Bey case.
No, I brought it to her attention even before she won. Because our organization worked on that case, and I said, here's a case that we would like for you to look at when you become prosecutor.
Rogers told me Gardner expressed interest in reopening the investigation in Fredrico's case. But it never gained traction. Gardner resigned in 2023 amid turmoil at the circuit attorney's office. In February of that year, months before her resignation, the office got one wrongful conviction overturned. It was Lamar Johnson, who spent 28 years in prison for a murder he didn't do. A judge set aside his conviction.
After 28 years in prison, Lamar Johnson walks free. A St. Louis judge orders his release, declaring him innocent.
Fredrico Lowe-Bey's case, though, never got the movement that Rogers and Centurion Ministries were seeking from Gardner. After her resignation, the governor chose Gardner's replacement to fill the job at least until the next election. His choice was Gabe Gore, a former federal prosecutor who went into private practice. Gore ran in the next election and is now serving his first full term as circuit attorney. In May of 2024, the office announced it had Fredrico's case under review. A 2021 Missouri law allows local prosecutors to file a motion with the court to vacate a conviction based on claims of actual innocence. It's Fredrico's last chance. As my reporting on this case was winding down, I reached out to Gore for an interview. He agreed to speak with me, but said he wouldn't comment on any specifics on Fredrico's case because it's a pending matter. But he would talk to me about the conviction review process in the circuit attorney's office.
I have not read deeply into the Fredrico Lowe-Bey case yet. I did have a meeting with his attorneys where they shared kind of their overview of the matter with me, but I haven't delved deeply into it. So I don't, not prepared to speak, nor would I speak to the specific facts of the case. We don't talk about pending investigations. That's a long-standing policy of the office.
The process of conviction review is long and arduous, and involves several steps if a case makes it all the way through. First, Fredrico had to submit his case for review. So after Gore was elected, that's what Centurion did.
We will review any submission someone makes. Those submissions can come in from a prison inmate, is in the form of just a written letter. They can come from a parent, or in Fredrico Lowe-Bey's case, he has very experienced, skilled counsel that submitted a application for review of his case.
Submissions for a conviction review go through an initial screening, the first review, where they check to see if there's anything more to look at. Gore said most cases don't make it past the initial review because they don't see an avenue to claim actual innocence. Fredrico's case is past the initial screening. Centurion Ministries gave a memo to Gore outlining the innocence claims. The DNA, the medical report, the freckles description, the cops who investigated him. I've read the memo, and all the highlights are there. So the circuit attorney's office decided Fredrico's case warrants a closer look. That is where the second review comes in.
And that really usually probably involves just reviewing everything available in the file, making an assessment as to whether or not it's a matter that we want to go into a full investigation on.
The second review is what was pending as of my conversation with Gore in October. After that review, if the conviction integrity prosecutor thinks the case deserves a full investigation, they present it to an executive committee of advisors. The ultimate decision on whether to reopen the case lies with Gore. If it gets there, the third review would involve investigative legwork, like interviewing witnesses and getting additional expert opinions if they need to.
When we get to that point, we will, trust me, leave no stone unturned. So we will do whatever is necessary before we take really the extraordinary step of going to the court and saying, we actually believe there's actual innocence here, and we can prove it by clear and convincing evidence, and you need to set this conviction aside.
There's no guarantee that the circuit attorney's office will reopen the investigation into Fredrico's conviction. It's been a year and a half since the office put the case under review. Gore said there were around 5 conviction integrity cases past the initial review stage as of October. So here are the possibilities in Fredrico's case. Gore could decide to reopen the investigation. If that happens, they could try to uncover new information. The main thing I'm thinking about in that scenario is the DNA. There's no evidence that it's ever been put into a law enforcement database to search for a potential match. Or if they have a lead on somebody who they think the DNA might belong to, they could try to get a comparison from that person specifically. After a full investigation, the office could file what's called a motion to vacate in St. Louis Circuit Court. They would be making the argument that the person convicted is actually innocent, and for that reason, the court should set the conviction aside. At that point, it would be up to a judge. The other possibility is the circuit attorney's office could decide not to reopen the investigation into Fredrico's conviction. In that scenario, Fredrico's last legal pathway under Missouri law to prove his innocence to a court would be exhausted. The legal standard the circuit attorney's office would have to meet if it filed a motion to vacate is clear and convincing evidence. It's one level below beyond a reasonable doubt, the burden of proof required to obtain a conviction. Nonetheless, clear and convincing evidence is a high bar. Fredrico expressed confidence that the circuit attorney's office could meet that bar if they take the case all the way. I asked the local attorney partnering with Centurion Ministries on Fredrico's case, Rick Sindel, if he thought they could satisfy the burden of proof.
I think so. We would certainly push to do additional investigation and inquiry of the alternate suspect and have his DNA evaluated.
There is precedent for vacating convictions in Missouri since the 2021 law was passed. 4 people have been exonerated, 2 in Kansas City and 2 in St. Louis. There's also precedent in Gabe Gore's tenure as circuit attorney. The office filed a motion to vacate the decades-old murder conviction of Chris Dunn based on claims of actual innocence. In 2024, a judge granted the motion.
I know this ain't gonna come work overnight, but we getting close to it. We getting close to, you involved. That's one thing. I haven't seen that. And, people do want to interview people. That's a good thing, because then nobody interviewed nobody. They just, bam, convicted and gone.
That's Tony Atkins, a close friend of Fredrico's who stood by him all these years. He told me he's waiting for something to break in the case, something that could boost Fredrico's claims. Another close friend, Stephen Whitfield, still doesn't believe Fredrico was good for the crime.
Number one, the worstest thing you can do is be in prison with a rape and a child molest. You know what I'm saying? So I look real down at them type of people. But Fred, I still have the same respect because I actually believe he didn't do it.
While Fredrico has family, friends, and advocates behind him, his own determination is truly remarkable.
You mark my word, I'm telling you, I'm getting out. I'm going to get out.
There's a balancing act he does when talking about getting out of prison. On one hand, he doesn't trust the criminal justice system in which he was charged, convicted, and sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison. Even though his fate is in the hands of current St. Louis Circuit Attorney Gabe Gore, he still expresses his wholehearted belief that he's getting out. But at the end of the day, he has to face the possibility of him being carried out of the Missouri Department of Corrections in a coffin rather than walking out a free man.
Have you thought about the likelihood that you're going to die in prison?
Yes. Yes. Most definitely yes.
Do you think that's the most likely outcome?
I'm not afraid of dying. I ain't afraid of dying. Death is no enemy's man. But if I got to go, I got to go. But if I got breath in my body to fight, St. Louis Circuit Attorney ought to stand up and put his feet down.
There was one person who didn't hold much credence to Fredrico's claims of innocence. That's Reuben Hammond, one of the patrolmen who investigated him in 1988.
Not really. I mean, there again, we're not there when a crime happens. And I don't know how many other people in the penitentiary said, I didn't do what I'm in here for.
I spoke to someone who was successfully exonerated after a wrongful conviction that remained intact for 24 years. His name's Daryl Burton, and he also had Centurion Ministries behind his case. I think it's still a somewhat common thought that everybody in prison claims they're innocent. So I asked Burton what he thought about that.
That's another what you call a misnomer. That's, some misdirected information. As they say, fake news, right? Everybody claim that when they get arrested, I'm innocent. But once they get to prison, Prisoners don't want to hear that.
Bobby Bostic spent 26 years behind bars, including a few years at the same prison as Fredrico. He remembered Fredrico as the jailhouse lawyer that he once looked up to.
And now that I'm out here, I can never forget him or the other guys I left behind. The passion in his voice convinced me that he is innocent, that they got the wrong person. That's how his plea to me came across. And that's what made me want to say, maybe this deserves a second chance to be looked at.
Burton doesn't know Fredrico personally, but he advocates for him from the outside because he believes in Centurion's mission to free people from prison it believes are innocent.
What they said to me, and I know the same thing they said to Fredrico, when we take your case, we're going to stay on your case till we, one, prove that you're innocent, or, God forbid, you should die in prison, natural causes, or whatever case may be. But they stick with you until they get you set free. And that's their motto.
It was 2008 when Burton was exonerated. 24 years of his life passed him by, so he knows how it feels trying to prove your innocence from behind bars.
Every minute counts, and that's what he's thinking. You know, when he have you on the phone, he's thinking tick, 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 tick. Every minute count, Matt. We trying to get me out.
Another thing Burton can speak to is just how difficult it is to prove you're innocent after you've been convicted by a jury of your peers. At one point, a court ruled that they believed Burton was in fact wrongfully convicted and innocent, but that due to a law passed in the 90s, the federal court was unable to do anything about it.
They said in that opinion, not only that they believe Missouri convicted an innocent man, but they said due to impediments erected by courts and by Congress, this court cannot go into the merits of the claims of Darrell Burton's innocence. That's what they used. They used that law to deny me habeas corpus relief.
So the court went as far to say that the state prosecuted the wrong guy, but it wasn't enough at the time to get Burton out of prison. Fredrico has encountered hurdles of his own. The state pushing back every time he made an effort to prove he was innocent, a judge denying his release despite the DNA not matching him, a critical piece of evidence not being discovered until years after the DNA decision, and former circuit attorney Kim Gardner vowing to review the case but never making any progress. What Fredrico does have going for him is advocacy. He's got a longtime criminal defense attorney in Rick Sindel, and he's got a community advocate in someone like Jamala Rogers, who has stuck with him since he first reached out to her in 1989.
When you have a case of injustice, there is somebody that's going to do the due diligence and find something. And what I'm thinking right now is that we have enough for the review to conclude that this is a case that needs to end.
When I first met attorney Rick Sindel, I asked him if he thought there was rock-solid evidence of Fredrico's innocence. His response to that was, "I'm waiting to see." During our interview a couple months later, I asked him what exactly he meant by that.
I don't think we have anything that clearly says he couldn't be the person. We just have a lot of reasons to doubt the validity of the conviction. Most of what we'd be looking for is the DNA that the actual rapist clearly left at the scene, and we don't quite have that.
So maybe there's not a smoking gun, but he's still saying there's a lot of smoke.
I did believe and still do believe that the verdict in this particular case was significantly flawed. The medical record that we finally uncovered was significant and it was never really explored at all, either at trial or in depositions. So those were things that I think would have been appropriate.
After months of reporting and reading the case file and talking to dozens of people, I want to go through what we know for certain and what is still unanswered in the case of Fredrico Lowe-Bey. Here's what we know for certain. 1. The DNA recovered from the vaginal swab and underwear of the victim does not belong to Fredrico Lowe-Bey. It also does not belong to the victim's then boyfriend or another man she named later on. 2. The medical report states the victim told the doctor directly after the rape that her last intercourse before the crime was 2 weeks prior. The police department criminalist and attending doctor both testified at trial, but the note about her last intercourse is mentioned nowhere in the trial transcripts. 3. The investigating officers, Reuben Hammond and James Long, were not trained sex crimes detectives in 1988, but they were the ones who conducted the investigation into the rape near Spring and Folsom and obtained the identification of Fredrico Lowe-Bey from the victim. 4. Fredrico was known to the officers because of prior arrests and an internal affairs complaint he filed against them the year before. One of the arrests was for drug possession, which Fredrico was acquitted of a month before the rape charges, investigated by the same officers. The internal affairs complaint, as well as a federal civil rights lawsuit, ended in favor of the officers. 5. Officer James Long testified the day before the trial began that the victim described the rapist in a phone call as light-complected with freckles. There was no mention of freckles anywhere in the police report. In 2007, the victim testified that she remembered Fredrico Lowe-Bey as being, quote, light-skinned with freckles. I hated that. It was scary to me, end quote. 6. The state has combated every effort to exonerate Fredrico. The request for DNA testing in 2001, the motion for release in 2007 based on the DNA not matching him, the petition for habeas corpus relief in 2014, the request for additional DNA testing of the victim's dress in 2015, as well as the request to put the unidentified sperm DNA into a law enforcement database to search for a match. 7. No one else has ever been arrested or charged in the rape, and police never identified the suspect vehicle. 8. The victim never formally recanted on her identification of Fredrico Lowe-Bey as the man who raped her. She was the only eyewitness of the crime, and she died in 2018. And here are some things we still don't know. 1. Whose DNA was collected from the vaginal swab and the underwear? 2. Why did the clear copy of the medical report not come to light until 2014, 26 years after Fredrico's conviction? 3. Why were 2 patrolmen who had a complaint lodged against them by the main suspect allowed to do the full investigation into this rape? Those are some of the main reasons that this case is frustrating. In a conversation with defense attorney Rick Sindel, he told me I had my work cut out for me if I was going to do a story about this case. He wasn't kidding. There have been more than 3,600 exonerations in the U.S. from 1989 through 2024, according to the National Registry of Exonerations. It's proof that the legal process can play out, technically the way it's supposed to, and still be prone to mistakes. Fredrico's post-conviction attorney, Scott Thompson, who's been a public defender for 30 years, has seen the inner workings of the process firsthand.
Trials and litigation are right most of the time, but not all of the time, as you know, the vast number of exonerations throughout the United States prove. I mean, you can have fair process, and it will still convict the innocent.
But, he said, it doesn't have to be that way. The state could go back to the drawing board, and maybe a case like Fredrico's calls for a different remedy. Would you go as far to say that you believe he is actually innocent?
Guilt or innocence is a legal conclusion, and I'm saying that the process wasn't fair, and we could make it fair. I mean, if the problem is, and I think this was pointed out to me when I did the appeal, that you know, in a close case like this, maybe the solution is to retry the case in light of the new evidence.
But the law has proven to be stringent in Missouri. The momentum in Fredrico's case has always been slowed down for one reason or another. For Centurion Ministries founder Jim McCloskey, the 22 years since he took on the case have been a roller coaster.
Every time we think we got something, like Kim Gardner, she was going to take a look at this case, then she faded because of our own political problems.
The case hasn't gained the cooperation of the courts, the prosecutors, or the police. It's what they've been vying for since 2003.
We were never able to convince a court or, to date, a prosecutor's office to take a serious look at this case, do their own investigation, talk to the witnesses, have have a hearing where you bring in all these different witnesses. Nobody's done that on the other side. No courts have done it, and no law enforcement people have done it. That's extremely frustrating.
On top of torturous, unfathomable, and confounding, you can add haunting to the list of adjectives used to describe the case of Fredrico Lowe-Bey.
This case haunts me so much. I think about him and his plight often with sorrow. You know, Fredrico calls me, and when he calls, I feel heavy, I'm pained, I'm in anguish because he's an innocent man and he's fighting and fighting. He never gives up. None of us give up.
When I spoke with Circuit Attorney Gabe Gore, he touted the office's Conviction Integrity Unit as helping build trust in the community. Gore got funding from the Board of Aldermen for a full-time conviction integrity prosecutor. The position is currently held by Rachel Morgan. The Circuit Attorney's website says she's an Army veteran and an experienced prosecutor. In my interview with Gore, he assured me the office will continue to do conviction integrity work.
We are an office that takes the concept that it is better that a guilty man go free than that an innocent man be convicted and sentenced to prison time, that we take that seriously.
That trust is hard for Fredrico because he sees the system that convicted him as rotten, corrupt. His doubt is from personal experience. What he claims is an illegal conviction. As he talked to me inside the Bonne Terre, Missouri prison, his body showed signs of aging. Physically, his face is no longer free of wrinkles like his youthful 20s. His head no longer covered with natural curly hair. The 64-year-old man doesn't have time on his side like he once did. No matter, according to him, the fight goes on.
I ain't never thought about giving up.
You have went through every single legal remedy that is available to you under Missouri and United States law, and you've been denied at every turn.
I've been denied every turn. But now I'm where Mr. Gore at. Maybe Mr. Gore can give me that benefit of the doubt that I need. Because guess what? At the end of the day, he ain't gonna sleep well. He's not gonna sleep well. The reason why I say he's not gonna sleep well is because I'm a believer. I believe.
You still have hope?
I believe. I believe in Allah. Allah is my greatest. That's my greatest hope.
Outside the walls of that maximum security prison in rural southeast Missouri, there are other people trying to keep the faith alive. Shervon Johnson has a plea for those in power.
Somebody please listen. Somebody please go back through whatever paperwork you have. Somebody help this young man, because this man ain't did this. He didn't do it. Please help him. 37 years is enough. Y'all taking 37 years of his life. Let him go.
After an emotional interview with Johnson that cloudy September morning, I got in my car and thought about everything that she had said. As I was driving back to the station, the conviction in her voice stayed with me. She remained convinced that Fredrico was put in prison for a crime he did not commit. During my drive, the gray clouds gave way to the sun. Suddenly, the day was filled with warmth instead of rain. I thought the change compared closely with how Johnson started telling a story riddled with grief, but ended with a message of faith.
I believe with all my heart and soul, he's going to prevail. One day, he's coming up out of that jail. I don't know when, I don't know how, but he's coming up out of that jail.
The state of Missouri knows Fredrico Lowe-Bey as inmate 153571. He's been trying to convince the world for more than 13,000 days that he's more than that number. The evidence is now out there for the public to reckon with, albeit messy and complicated. It's not my job to tell you what to think or give you my opinion. The natural question I've been asked many times is, what do I think about Fredrico Lowe-Bey's guilt or innocence? It's a very fair question, but I'm not going to tell you. I'll let you sit with the facts and the context from everyone involved who agreed to go on the record for this story. What I can say is that I'll keep asking questions because the last chapter of this story hasn't been written. So this is what my next burning question will be after the Circuit Attorney's Office takes a hard look at the case file of Fredrico Lowe-Bey. Now that you've seen what I've seen, do you believe there's an innocent man spending his life in a Missouri prison? Burden of Proof, One Man's Fight to Show He's Innocent is a First Alert 4 original podcast. It's produced and voiced by me, Matt Woods. If you want to see extended interviews, you can find them on our YouTube channel under the playlist for this podcast. If you know something about this case, please reach out to me. You can email matthew.woods@kmov.com, 2 T's on the first name, or call my desk at 314-444-6327. If you listen to this series on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please help us reach more people by rating the podcast. Thanks for listening.